re-upload to the video of Los Palillos. Now, Los Palillos was a very unique. They called it a gang, but it was not a gang. It was an actual cartel. They were well organized. They were uh, well rounded for the numbers that they had. Uh, they did a lot of actual. They put in a lot of work. They were very successful. They were actually profitable for the years that they ran. They ran from like 2004 till 2007. So for that amount of time, the money that they generated was actually pretty impressive, by the way. So they called it a faction from the AFO in Tijuana, but they were not. They were their own cartel, and they were actually just kicking up in order for them to conduct business in Tijuana. But unfortunately, one of them actually got taken out, got handled, and it turned out to be a brother of an actual cartel member, the same cartel. So, not really looking to actually look for revenge or vengeance or anything like that. They actually decided to relocate to San Diego, Chula Vista specifically. So now this actual cartel is conducting business in Chula Vista, and I don't know exactly how it works, but they apparently had the actual San Diego to the Midwest, a certain state. So they had that route, and however they run it, the main guys, they really stay out of it. As long as you get the product there and you get the money back, they pretty much leave you alone. Let you do your thing, and if you get if you start kicking up too much dust, they'll make the adjustments, and apparently they were allowed to do this after one of their members got taken out in Tijuana, for the reason that they were earners. They were actual earners, so why wouldn't they allow them to actually conduct business? But now they're doing it in San Diego. So as time passed by, you actually have to consider the actual the difference in law enforcement, and the difference in law enforcement meaning how things get investigated, how things are actually handled at a local level, and comparing the two cities, Tijuana and Chula Vista. Well, then you got a major gap in actual equality. Not quality, but actual interest in fighting crime. But soon afterwards, the body count started coming up, and the amount of bodies and how these bodies were actually being found were not traditional. These were not drive-by. These were not actual, dumped out in the actual, in the rural areas of the county. These were, they appeared in abandoned cars. So they started the local PD started, Chula PD started seeing this actual difference. And the difference of these homicides, they started almost comparing them to TJ style, TJ style homicides, and it's a big difference. So, when you start seeing that, you kind of wonder, who was doing it, and what actual part of the cartels are actually coming over and actually doing these types of hits, and not knowing exactly what is being set up here, and but with time, this actual individual group, Los Palillos, they started doing some kidnappings for some high profit. These guys are doing the extortion. They were doing the whole thing, knowing that these victims were not going to go to the cops. For the fact that they couldn't justify the actual money, they couldn't account for the money. So how can you? And how can you go to the FBI and the FBI is going to ask you, well, why do they think you have access to $1 million? And that's when you start getting. That's what the actual victims are trying to avoid. So they started putting up these ransoms, and within that time span, they collected a little bit over $1 million in the actual kidnapping. Because they're still running dope, they're still actually doing everything that a cartel does, but now they're successfully doing ransoms in the United States. And so when you have that element, you're doing something right. You're actually very successful at that type of level. And the way they were doing it, they were conducting themselves as officers that would conduct raids, that would actually kick down doors. So that's one method that they use. But the other method would be the honey traps. Using teenage females to actually set these older gentlemen up, and they had females that actually they knew what they were doing. And so to the point, and very, very successful at setting up these actual businessmen for ransom. And like all things, it always happens. Like I've always told you guys, the majority of people that eventually get caught is because they change up on their actual patterns. They change up on their tactics. Now with this last one, they bumped it up to $2 million ransom. Okay, not saying that the family could not afford it, but just think about, you have to actually come up with $2 million worth of actual bills. It's not an easy task. So this time the family goes to the FBI, and the FBI and the actual family member successfully deliver a suitcase with $2 million. And along with that suitcase came along a tracking device. So now they do their thing. They actually can identify the kidnappers now, and so now they got to put all the pieces together for this puzzle of this actual cartel, and they do, and they get names. They get names out there. They get some faces, some posters. So now you got the actual gang being sought after, the cartel. So now they're hiding out, and so they're actually on a list. So apparently one day an actual Chula Vista police officer spotted one of them in a vehicle and lit him up, and the actual this cartel member, he didn't hold back. No, he didn't hold back, and he opened up on him, and it was a very, very scary moment for the police officer. He was not killed, but the actual vehicle was bullet ridden. And then, so they showed their force. And if you're gonna prove a point, you're gonna prove it that way. And they actually they came out pretty brutal on the actual on how you're gonna catch me. Because the fact that if you're gonna open up on a cop in San Diego, in Chula Vista, he did it, but you're gonna get everybody after and unfortunately this cop's traumatized now. I don't think he can return to a beat after a situation like that, to be honest. I don't think you can. So now, as a department, now you have your stress levels up, your sense of reality actually kicks in. Do I have the right armor on? Do I have the correct weapons to actually defend myself against a certain weapon? To go up against an actual a cartel that's better armed than you. Your unit. And Chula Vista could be pretty, as hard to believe. Chula Vista is pretty rural, but in a developed way. So there is an actual large amount of actual territory to cover, mile wise, acreage wise. But so they're pretty spread thin for a nearest backup, because the fact that it's mostly streets that you actually have to go through from the station to the actual eastern part of actually Chula Vista, and that's where actually this takes place. So once you start questioning actual your own gear, that brings up a department's stress level and their actually concerns, and of course we're talking about Chula Vista PD, so they reacted in a very non-professional. I've had my issues with them, and I've discussed on this channel before, and they came back dirty. They came back and played dirty, and if they actually uh, waved away your civil rights, well, let it be. You know what I mean? If they had to put hands on you in public, they do. You know, and they did. And unfortunately, at this time, this actual this is being played out. Uh, INS is actually conducting. They're not undercover operations. Not to get it. Don't get undercover and plain clothes are two different things, you know. And they get so many tips, either online or by phone calls, to investigate homes, to investigate vehicles, to investigate uh, people for either for drugs or for actual for smuggling people. You know, different. They get different calls, so they have to follow up on these actual tips physically. You know, and during this process, the police department actually noticed what they thought was a suspicious actual individual leaving a strip mall, and he was a little bit on the younger side, Hispanic, and so they lit him up. They pulled him over, and apparently they didn't like what the answers that he was given, and so they pulled him out of the car and roughed him up pretty good, tossed him around, you know, threw him on the ground. All meanwhile, this actual individual is actually identifying himself as an ICE agent, working, you know, some tips, you know, and the way the investigator actually made it sound like he was undercover, but if he was really undercover, he would have never revealed his identity. He would have just had to go along with the actual abuse, and then the DOJ will actually find a way to bail him out on a non government capacity. They'll post bond out of a bond company. I mean a bail company. You know. So if it was really true undercover, that's what actually happened. But this isn't the case. The DOJ actually went there in person and said, "Hey, we're here to pick up our officer. You have him in custody." And that's when the whole thing blew up. You know what I mean? That's when all this civil rights actually came out, and if it could happen to him, I mean, he's an ICE agent with a badge. He had a badge on him, and they still did not, believe him supposedly, and they still, they put a whooping on him. They put hands on him, and he paid the price. So the difference here is he was plain clothes, and you're gonna do plain clothes investigations on the streets for the fact that you don't want a big jacket that says ICE on it. You don't want to be in uniform because people are actually gonna tell on you. I mean, there are people gonna tell on you, hey, ICE is on the block, ICE is in Chula Vista, ICE is here, and there are actual, that's how people communicate sometimes in migrant cities. And so they put quite a bruise on this actual ICE agent, and I've mentioned in other videos too. When these type of things happen, things get worked out. Things get taken care of at the actual at the suits. The political, the politics on that level. And just to cool things out. But there was such abuse that they allowed this actual ICE agent to. When I say allowed, you get talked to, me, but they actually allowed this ICE agent to actually sue the city of Chula Vista, and he actually won a suit for 2.2 million, and not only that, they allowed him to continue to be an ICE agent because the federal government has a right to actually not employ you if you have a certain amount of money, and that includes the military too. They can actually deny you employment for the fact that you'll never make that much. You'll never make that money working for them that you already have. So what they don't want to have anybody with nefarious actual intentions to actually be employed if there's no need for you to be employed. And so this actually. They actually allowed him to be employed still, and he's still an ICE agent, believe it or not. And so for that to actually happen, a police department messed up, really messed up, And as for the cartel members, yeah, they got life terms. Multiple got life terms. The majority, actually, quite a few of them actually deceased. But I don't know if there's still any out there outstanding. But the main guys, they got a few life sentences, And when an actual cartel moves into an actual border city that this close, and they start doing these kinds of operations, the government's going to try its best, and it's going to come down with every arsenal that they have to avoid copycats, to avoid it to be common, And they have tactics that are very, very effective. They're very, very actual, to the point. They might not seem bright civilly, but it just has to be done, Especially with kidnappings, they cannot allow it because they will not pay for a ransom. And the reason that they actually entertained them to actually get a tracking device, and these guys didn't put that actual scenario in their actual plan, because I don't even think the banks are doing it at this time. So it might have been that way. It's actually new technology that was actually being tried out, and these guys, were the actual were a target of the actual like a GPS type. It wasn't very, very common at the time, at the time. So this is just another one here for another story on on a border town. Don't forget to like and subscribe, guys. Thanks a lot.